What's up guys, my name is Lex Veldhuis and welcome to another edition of Lex Reflects. Today we're gonna take a look at a hand played by Magnus Carlsen. Yes, that's right, it's the chess legend. They're playing 10-20, it's super deep, it's another game at Hustler Casino Live. It's a game that Alexander Botes got together and it's full of creators plus poker vlogger Mariano. Now, it's gonna be a pretty wild game and there's pretty wild action in this hand, so let's jump straight into it. Mariano was V-pipping about 90%, and we can immediately pause here because as we see, Mariano makes it 50, Magnus 3-bets to 300 with 4-3. Now, I definitely like to see the Swedish blood flowing through his veins when he's playing a game of poker. I definitely think that 4-3 is a little bit aggressive. Of course, it's really good to have some lower board coverage hands, and also I understand he's not a poker pro, but I still think there are some important lessons to learn. Also, if there's some chess people watching this video, I know a lot of chess people like to play some poker, so we might as well talk about some hand selection as well. So he chooses the 4-3 suited, fine, 3-bets a little bit chunky, absolutely okay with it, it's super deep, and you're going to have to add some of these hands in because on low boards, people don't usually give each other credit in games like this. So having some lower suited connectors is definitely very good. I do think that you lack some fold equity, so your opponents aren't going to throw their cards away much. So I think that a hand like 6-5 suited, that's a little bit more resilient, is a little bit better to function at the bottom. We see Rice-all call with a king-5 in a small blind, but that kind of indicates a problem with playing 4 high as well, if you're going to get called by king highs. Now, next up we see Nick, 4-bet the small blind. I like his sizing. They're about 600 big blinds deep, which is absolutely crazy. They're about 600 big blinds deep, and he makes it 1200. Now, I do think that in this position, you kind of want to go for more suited broadways to bluff with. So a hand like ace-jack suited, ace-10 suited, king-10 suited, or king-queen suited, or something like that, you get the gist of it. It's already a lot better. You're out of position, you're going to get called a lot. Having a suited hand adds a lot of playability and adds a lot of equity. So Mariano's thinking about it because he had to promise to play very loose because he's the poker expert in this lineup. Thinks about it, throws it away.
Are they the tilted greens or the happy greens? Stay tuned.
There we see Magnus. And the interesting thing here for Magnus is the fact that if he elects to re-raise with a hand like this, he definitely has to call a 4-bet. They're infinitely deep. He has position. It's very unlikely that his hand is dominated. And it's very safe to assume that Bryce is relatively capped in this hand, even though he calls a 3-bet. He just is going to raise most of his strong hands, and he just wants to play a flop now. On top of that, I think flops are generally relatively easy to play with 4-3 because you're either going to flop a pair and see if you want to call a bet or not, or you flop some kind of draw that you can have pretty easy decisions with. You're never going to flop some top pair with a shitty kicker or some middle pair that you're going to have to defend multiple streets with. Or so you think.
He wouldn't have raised it like that. I think he's got...
I really like the call here, but Magnus 4-3 suited also has a ton of value against high card hands. Bryce does not know it's his turn. Younger internet generation, dopamine, depletion, wants to fold out a turn to speed up the action.
I'll make it easier for you. I'm folding out a turn.
Which can only happen in games like this. But it was actually his turn. So to the flop we go. And we see king 4-8. Flop's relatively good for Nick. He can make a lot of hands fold. Magnus can have tons of hands like queen jack, 10-9. 10-jack that are going to fold relatively quickly on this board. He bets 700. I love the c-bet size. It's about 25%. I think that's perfect on a board like this. Obviously, Magnus is not going to go anywhere. I think the flop plays absolutely standard. I don't think there's anything I would have liked to see differently. Magnus obviously not going to go anywhere. He gets a great price. He could have the best hand.
We are in overtime. I hope you guys are enjoying the show on this Wednesday evening. We're back at it tomorrow.
And the turn is a 9. Now, I definitely think that Magnus has an advantage with the 9. He has 8-9 suited. He has pocket 9s. He has more king 9s. I mean, it's not an overwhelming equity advantage by any means, but
Poker will be in the game for Max Payne. Hoodie Allen in the chat. What's up, Hoodie?
all right, so possible 4,000 and 4,200, and we see Nick bet 1,600. This is definitely where I would have liked him to bump it up a little bit more. At some point in the hand, you're going to have to start betting big and pressuring. And you're pressuring exactly the kinds of hands that Magnus has. I think that the second bet really allows for ace-jack here to get folds from hands like 6s, 7s, 4-3 suited, 5-4 suited. or ace-4 and hands like that, I definitely would have liked to see a bet more along the size of 3K, which also leaves you a relatively good river shove as well. 1600 is just a little bit too small. It doesn't really accomplish anything.
Let's cheers to that.
Thanks for joining us, Eric.
At this point, the board hasn't really changed yet. Magnus can just honestly go with his flop read. He gets a really good price. He can just think like, hey, this guy might be bluffing. I have a certain feeling about this. I'm just going to stick around. And I really can't fault him for that.
Get a bet here from Nick. Magnus calling again. Stubborn and sticky.
Yeah, I like that. Cheers. Nobody losing.
All right, river's at 10.
Don't worry.
And at this point, I really think that Nick has to blast at it.
My redemption arc is coming.
But we saw earlier on, he considered calling with king high. If Nick bets again here.
Crazy good return. Oh yeah. I made that on like 5
Hey, dude, that was very close to not being returned.
Can Magnus find the call?
One hand away from
I have no read on what's going on.
I have no idea.
And I feel like an idiot. I've been trying to figure it out. I'm very confused.
All right, so we see Nick bet 3,200. And like I said, I really would have liked to see him up the bet sizing here and just go for a shove. At this point, you really have to make your opponent fold some middle pairs. And one of the biggest problems about bet sizes like this is, and I think there's a really good lesson in here for you guys as well, you hear people say a lot, I want to make it look like a value bet. I want to make it feel like a value bet. But the only thing that you're doing is you're giving your opponent a cheap price to actually just call the bet. You make a value bet, you make it look like a value bet by just betting massive. If you have a good hand, you want to bet big. And on top of that, that's how you want to get value. And on the other side of the coin, it also creates more fold equity for when you're bluffing. Small bets just don't really work in polarized situations. It's just too easy to click call. There would be no reason at all to even fold, like if you have a hand like queen 9 of spades or ace 9 of spades or ace 10 of spades. Just the fact that your opponent could be bluffing sometimes is good enough to call here, and it will qualify. And especially when somebody is prone to want to call, like they discussed that Magnus once thought earlier about calling with king high, you want to put some extra pressure as well. 3,200 is less than half of the pot, and I think that's where the biggest mistake in his hand lies. But Magnus has
You're going 3 streets, eh? Actually, somehow, I don't believe you at all.
Your instincts are spot on.
There aren't a lot of hands. You have ace-king, obviously. There aren't a lot of hands that you would just go 3 streets with there. Like, I have so many of these hands that crush this board.
All right, so it's very awesome to see somebody with the brain of Magnus Carlsen talk about poker out loud this way, right? Because he's obviously in a learning curve in poker. He really enjoys the game. This is not his first appearance in a tournament, in a cash game like this. And I just love to see it. So it's kind of interesting what he's saying, because he is right. The fact that the board ran out the way it did means that Magnus is going to have more strong hands, right? He's going to have more. He has 10-9 of spades. He has 8-9, 10-9 suited, 10-8 suited. He has queen-jack of spades. He has king-10, king-9, pocket tens, you name it. So he has a ton of really strong hands that Nick probably doesn't have, right? If Nick has pocket tens, there's a very big likelihood that he's going to check on the turn. He's also not going to 4-bet with king-10 very often. There's only 2 combinations of king-10 suited, and he might not even pick those to 4-bet without a position. So I completely agree with Magnus that this board run out is really in Magnus's favor. As a counterpoint, though, I will say that that makes the bet stronger. If a board runs out in your favor and your opponent still bets, you really have to wonder, why isn't he afraid of this board? So I think that Magnus is actually providing some counter arguments for the fact that this becomes more of a fold. Now, I will obviously say this is coming from a lot of experience, having the time to think about a hand, and obviously Magnus is new to poker, and it's amazing to see, and I think that a lot of his assumptions are correct, and I think it's very cool that he already knows that this board is in favor of him. Obviously, it's also a creator game. You're going to see lots of random things, so I'm not here to try and nitpick about strategy, but because we also have a poker audience, I think it's also very interesting to see what this means, right? There's a lot of new viewers that watch hands like this, and I think it's very important to note some things down.
I just don't believe you at all.
And that's important too.
The fact that Nick just got
look really
bluffed
stupid.
Yeah, he's like no.
has to be a factor in this hand.
Like, but I just don't believe you. I don't believe you at all.
Which happens, and he's right.
Wow, what a call!
I mean, in the end, really sick
What
hero
a
call.
call.
For Magnus Carlsen.
Look at him being happy as well.
Okay.
That's amazing.
Okay.
Nice call. This man can only win
No,
with
but
3
seriously. No, but seriously. Yeah.
Everything you say made sense.
He just looked at process and
But
was
it was
like, you
still.
Nick can't believe it. He's hit by a train. He can't understand what he just got called by.
Kick him out. Sammy, deal him out. Deal him out.
Yeah.
No more Magnus. Go back to your game.
Nick looks like somebody just kicked his puppy.
All right, and that's it for today's video. Again, it's so awesome to see people like Bryce Hall and Alexander Botez and Magnus Carlsen and all the people at the table playing poker and in these creator games. So shout out to Alexander for getting that together. Shout out to Hustler Casino Live for letting us use the footage. Obviously, check them out. They have really great cash games every single week. You can find their links in the description down below. And I really hope that there's going to be more chess people playing poker because of this. If you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe. I do these kind of pop-up videos a lot. And if you have any questions about the poker strategy or any other comments, then make sure you comment down below. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.
It kind of makes sense.
Straddle.
It's just hard to.
Whatever, Magnus.
What?